Bienvenidos al capítulo 6, parte 2 de compras. Okay, so in this section, we're going to focus just on indirect object pronouns. Okay, so in lesson 5, you learned that chapter 5, you learned that a direct object receives the action of the verb directly. In contrast, an indirect object receives the action of the verb indirectly. So, Roberto le presta 100 pesos a Luisa. Okay, so we have here now, we have the indirect object pronoun le corresponding to the indirect object pronoun a Luisa. Okay, so one way I like to look at these indirect object pronouns is that they are expressing transfer of one thing to another. Okay, so in this case, le presta 100 pesos. So loans or lends 100 pesos to transferring to Luisa. An indirect object pronoun is a noun or pronoun that answers the question to whom or for whom an action is done. In the preceding example, the indirect object answers this question. ¿A quién le presta Roberto 100 pesos? So, to whom does Robert lend the 100 pesos? And we see here, Roberto le presta 100 pesos a who? To who? ¿A quién? A Luisa. All right, so these are our indirect object pronouns. And again, for our purposes here, we're going to go ahead and omit the os or the vosotros form. So we do have here though, we have me, to or for me, te, to or for you in the second person, familiar, le, to or for you in a formal sense, or to or for him or her in the third person sense, nos, and les. So to or for you, formal, or y'all, as we say here in Texas, or to or for them, talking about a plural number of people in the third person. Okay, and that's it. These are our indirect object pronouns. Atención! The forms of indirect object pronouns for the first and second person are the same as the direct object pronouns. So you might remember that from earlier. We looked at indirect object pronouns. Mete, nos, same things, or their exact same form. Indirect object pronouns agree in number with the corresponding nouns, but not in gender. Okay, so this isn't like an adjective where we have to describe if a man is tall, he is alto, or if a woman is short, ella es baja. All right, we won't change anything based on the gender here, just based on the number. The pronoun will agree to the number of corresponding nouns. So is it singular? Is it plural? Bueno, le doy un descuento. So you're saying, oh, okay, I'll give you a discount. Or I'll give him a discount. Very good. So let's look here. Using indirect object pronouns. Spanish speakers commonly use both an indirect object pronoun and the noun to which it refers in the same sentence. This is done to emphasize and clarify to whom the pronoun refers. Okay. So we see here. Ella le vende la ropa a Elena. Elena is indirectly receiving what we have here. So we're signifying to her. All right? She is the indirect beneficiary of this action here. Ella le vende. So ella is the one, she is the one actually creating the action here. She's selling. But who is on the indirect end of this? And that is going to be Elena. Okay? Ella le vende la ropa a Elena. Another example. Les prestamos el dinero a Inés y a Alex. So we're the ones right here. Nosotros prestamos. We are loaning the money to Inés and Alex. Okay? Indirect object pronouns are also used without the indirect object noun, when the person for whom the action is being done is known. Okay, so we have our first sentence here. Ana le presta la falda a Elena. También le presta unos jeans. Okay, so since here in this sentence we're saying where is the indirect object? The indirect object here. Elena. Okay. So we don't have to repeat it again because we already know who we're referring to. Ana le presta la falda a Elena, and we're following it up with another sentence also describing Elena here. También le presta unos jeans. Okay. Indirect object pronouns are usually placed before the conjugated form of the verb. In negative sentences, the pronoun is placed between no and the conjugated verb. So we have here the verb comprar. We have a conjugated verb of that, compra. Martín me compra un regalo. Eva no me escribe cartas. So we have no between the pronoun or the noun and the conjugated verb. Okay, so no will just fall right between these two. Eva no me escribe cartas. Martín me compra un regalo. When a conjugated verb is followed by an infinitive or the present progressive, the indirect object pronoun may be placed before the conjugated verb or attached to the infinitive or present participle. Okay, so this is a bit of information. It's interesting and definitely useful later on. For this particular chapter, this is not necessary though. But I would look it over and look at the examples and maybe study this just a bit, just for future use. Okay, but for this chapter, the test for this week, this is not anything that we're going to have to focus on. Okay. Él no quiere pagarte. Él no te quiere pagar. So we're just seeing here that we can either put our indirect object te attached to the unconjugated verb, the infinitive of the verb, or we can simply take it and put it before the conjugated verb. Okay. Él está escribiéndole una postal a ella. Él le está escribiendo una postal a ella. So we see here again. Later on, whenever we're using this together with the present progressive, which is just the form when we're describing something that we're doing in the moment, we have a choice. We can tack that on at the very end of the gerund, or we can take that and we can actually place it before está or estar followed by the present progressive. So just bear in mind, estar plus the present progressive can never be separated, but you can either put it before or you can tack it on to the very end of the gerund here. Because the indirect object pronouns le and les have multiple meanings, Spanish speakers often clarify to whom the pronouns refer with the preposition a plus pronoun or a plus noun. Okay, so really this is not very complicated, but we just have here unclarified statements followed by clarified statements. So we're being very, very just general here. This is going to be if we're talking in a specific context, the person would already know who we're talking about, versus if we are just starting the conversation, for example, we have to say who it is we're talking about in Spanish. A usted, a él, a ella, or a Juan, a ustedes, a los clientes, to the customers. Okay, so that's all we're talking about here. The irregular verbs dar and decir are often used with indirect object pronouns. Very, very common. So we have in the present tense here, single forms of dar and decir, and the plural forms of dar and decir. Okay, just to jog your memory. Me dan una fiesta cada año. Voy a darle consejos. Okay. Te digo la verdad. No les digo mentiras a mis padres. Okay, so we see here that the verbs dar are the verb dar is very, very common. Okay, and very useful when discussing indirect object pronouns.